Okay, so what we're doing is giving the player the ability to pick up objects. So we're gonna have to modify the player a bit. So if you don't have this as a feature of your game, you probably don't really want to use this. So that's not why it's not a permanent part of the player, but it's something that you can add in if you like to. So we'll go over the setup and then we'll do a little bit of scripting. And the nice thing about this script is it's pretty simple. We're not even going to have to change the boxes at all. They'll just kind of get manipulated by the script. So we really just have to change the player and add in a new script for the player. Let's get started with that. I'm going to go over to the player section. So with our player, everything that we're going to add in is going to be parented to the camera. That's because the camera is what actually moves when we look around. And so that's how we determine where we're looking. And so that will, orient the other aspects of what we're going to add now. So we've got our player, we've got our camera, and so we're going to add a couple things. One is we need an area to detect if there's an object near us so that we can pick it up. This is one method for doing this. You can also use a raycast. It kind of depends on what style you want. With a raycast, you have to be looking directly at the object. With this method, you don't actually have to be looking at the object. You have to just be in the area of the object. So either method is fine. I'm going to do this one because it's a little bit simpler scripting-wise. But the raycast isn't too bad. We could go over that if that was something you wanted to use. So we're going to add that first. And then we're also going to add a little point that represents kind of like the player's hand where we want the object to go when the player is holding it. And so those are kind of the main things that we're going to add here. I'm not going to add this to the player script because I want to leave the player script as is. I'm just going to create a whole other script that handles all this stuff. And I'm going to put it on the area itself. So I'm going to start by adding this detection area. I'm going to add in an area 3D. And so this is, has a collision shape, but it doesn't actually interact with the physics. So we know if something is inside this area, but it doesn't push things, it doesn't move anything. So let's rename this pickup area. And we have to add a collision shape. This doesn't get a mesh because we're not going to be able to see this. It's just kind of an area that we set to detect objects. So for the shape, I'm just going to use a box. You can really use whatever shape you think is best, but I think a box is good. And just like everything else, I don't want to move the box. I want to move the area. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's just better. So I'm going to move the area into place where I want it in front. So this is the camera, so I can kind of move it, to the front of the player so we can pick up objects that are in front of us. And then I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. So if the object is kind of low to the ground, I'll be able to pick it up. Or if it's up here in the field of vision. And then however big you make this box, either, X and Z is basically the field of the area where you can pick up objects. So if you want it to be very large, you can pick up objects that are very far away. You can make it very large. If you only want to be able to pick up objects that are very close, obviously you make it smaller. And if you want to change that area, if you get like a magic potion or something, you can do that with a script. But we're just going to define our area here. So that's our pickup area. And then the next thing we're going to add is a marker. So a marker is basically just like a point in space that you can use to reference something that you want an object to go there, but we're not drawing anything there. It's just an empty point. So our marker, I'm just going to name this. This is like our hand. This is like if we pick up the object, this is where it's going to go. And so we want to put this in our field of view. So the marker is just these little axes. They're kind of hard to see because it's very small when you have the gizmo on, but you can see it's this axis right here, and it basically just shows you, which how it's pointing in space. So we can move it down and over here, And we're just going to use the position, but you could also use the rotation if you wanted to align the object to a rotation. That's a little bit extra work, so I'm not going to do that. But you could, rotate this a little bit if you want the object to kind of move forward a little bit. But I'm just going to change the position. So I'm just going to keep this very simple. And I'm going to try to basically, I guess I might move it down a little bit and forward a little bit. And we can always move this if we want to. Okay, so that's our setup. That's all the new nodes that we're going to add. Everything else we're going to do from here is scripting. So I'm going to click on the pickup area, and I'm going to make a new script. And I'm going to make sure to put this in my scripts folder. And I'm going to call this pickup is fine. And I'll click create. Okay, so now we've got a script. You can see it extends our area 3D. And we're going to use this script to detect if we're around an object, and then also detect if we've picked up the object. And then we're also going to use it to drop or throw the object. So there's a few different parts that it's going to do. A couple other things, actually, before we write our script, let's make sure that we add a new collision layer for our pickup area. So I'm going to go to my layer names, and we already have a pickable. And so then let's say a pickup detector. And so we'll put this on layer 5, the pickup detector, and we'll turn off the player. And this is only going to be looking for pickable objects. So we'll turn off the player, and we'll just look for pickable objects. So this way, we're not going to try to pick up anything that we don't want to pick up. So that should be good. Then the other thing we're going to add here is a signal to detect if we are in the area of something. So this is where this will be different if you're not using a physics body. If you're using like an object, you might want to use area or something else. But since we're using a body, we can use body entered. So I'm just going to double click, and I'm going to connect this signal to the pickup area function and click connect. So we've got that in there, and now we can start scripting out the rest of our logic. Okay. Any questions so far before we get started with our script? Okay. So we need to know about a couple things, and so we're going to use a couple onReadies. So remember, an onReady is something that we load from the scene when the scene starts. So we can say at onReady. And so we need to know a couple things. One is where the hand is, because we're going to parent, or we're going to move the object to the hand. So I'm going to say onReady variable hand, and then I'm going to set equals, and I can just drag this right here, and it'll just add that reference for me. Then I also want to know where the camera is, because when I throw the object, I'm going to throw it in the opposite direction of the camera. It just orients me in space, so I know which way I'm throwing it. So I'm going to say at onReady var camera, and then I'm just going to drag this camera in here. And I guess, oh yeah, it's just the parent. So that's kind of funny. I didn't notice that before, but that's fine. Okay, so then we need a couple other variables that are member variables that are just in the script. One is the object that we want to pick up. So we're going to call this the pickup object. And this is going to be set to null to begin with. So there's nothing in this object to begin with. And then we're also going to say Boolean is picked. So there's a couple things with this script. It assumes that you can only pick up one thing at a time. So if one thing is picked up, we can't pick up other things. And so we're going to use this Boolean, and if we have something picked up and we trigger that Boolean, then we won't be able to pick up other stuff until we either drop or throw the object. Okay, so now we can use this to detect if we're picking something up. So when a body enters, the first thing we're going to do is if we've already got something picked up, then we just want to ignore other bodies. So we'll just completely ignore this. So we'll say if there is a pickup object. So that'll be true if it's not null, since it starts as null. Okay, so if we add an object here, this will be true. and is picked. So this means we've already picked it up, because we can like see an object and not pick it up and then see another object. So we want to make sure that we've already picked it up. So if both of those things are true, we're just going to return. And what that means is it just stops running the function. It just goes back to wherever this came from. So I'll write a little comment here. So first check if an object is picked up. And if it is, if so, and function here. Okay, so if there's no object picked up, then we just assign the pickup object to this body that just entered the area. So that's very simple. We just say pickup object equals body. Okay, so this isn't really going to do anything so far. It just tells us that we have a pickup body. But let's just log this. So I'm going to say print pickup object. So we can just see that this works. And we can double check our collisions and layers and make sure everything's connected correctly. So I have to make sure to go to level 1 where my objects are. And I can't really see my log, but we'll see it when we go back. So I'm just going to run it around, and we should see here, you can see that we have, this is what this print line did here. It just prints out to the console. You can see that we've run into these boxes. So we've detected that the boxes exist. Okay, so now what we want to do is pick up a box. And if we pick up a box, we want to position the box near our hand. So this has two parts to it. One is using the user input to detect if we hit a button that says that we want to pick up an object. So we need to map a button for that. So I'm going to go to project and go to project settings. And I'm going to scroll up here, or I'm going to go to input map rather. And I'm going to add a new action for pickup. So I'm going to click add, and then I'll just add a button for this. I'm going to use the F key. You can obviously use whatever you want. I'm going to use just the F key for this. And then I'm also going to add an action to throw the object. So I'm going to call this throw, click add, and then I'm going to add a new button. And for this one, I'm going to do a mouse button. I'm going to do mouse left. So now I can pick up the object. I'll double hit F to drop it, but if I want to throw it, I'll click the left mouse button. So I've mapped my inputs. I can always go back and change those later. So first let's pick up. So we're going to use a unhandled input function. And this is just a function that looks for any button clicks or key presses or mouse movements, whatever else. And if something else isn't using them, it uses them for our script. So you have to be a little bit careful here. If you had your F button mapped to something else, that might create an issue, but we don't have that. So we're just going to use this. And so what we'll do is we'll say if input dot is action just pressed. We want to use just pressed because we just want to do this once per frame. And then we're going to look for pickup, which we just added. Okay, so we're just going to say, has the user just use the pickup button. Okay. So there's a couple things that we need to check first. So first we need to know, do we already have an item picked up? Okay, so we're going to say if pickup object. If there is an item picked up, then we need to either decide to pick it up, or actually this is if an item is detected. So if the item is detected, if we have some object in our area, we can either pick it up or not. So we can say so first we can say if is picked. So if we have an object and it is picked up, then if we hit F, that means that we want to drop it. So all we're going to do is say pickup object equals null, and is picked equals false. Okay, so then if there's an object but it's not picked, we can say else is picked equals true. And so if that's true, if it's picked, we basically said that we want to pick up this object. Okay. So I think that's everything we need to do here. We'll test it in just a second. No, I think that's it. So this should work, but we need to actually move the object. So this will pick up the object, but we need to move the object. Okay, so let's add some comments. So we'll say this is to detect user input. This is if user hits F or pickup button. Okay, if object detected, and if object already picked up, then drop object, else pick up object. And so it might not seem like this is doing a lot, but essentially if we know that if we've detected an object and we've decided we picked it up, that's all we need to know to basically say that we want the object to go to that position of our hand. Okay, so to do that, we need to add a physics process function. So a physics process function is running, the game engine is running it, to make everything in the scene move. It's detecting if things are colliding, and it's doing all this other stuff. With a rigid body, we don't want to just like set the position of the rigid body directly, because that'll kind of upset the physics process. What instead we do is we give it a force. So we basically just push it towards the hand, and eventually it'll reach the hand and it'll look like it's stuck to the hand. So for our physics process, we just add a new func, physics process. We didn't use this event here, so we're just gonna put an underscore here, and we're not gonna use the delta here, so we're just gonna put an underscore there. And so then for our physics process, we're gonna first detect if we have an object and if it is picked. So if pickup object and is picked. So if we have an object and it is picked, what we're gonna do is calculate the distance between the object and the hand, and then we're gonna move the object towards the hand. So this takes a couple steps. So we're gonna say we need the position of the object. So we'll say object position, I'll just use a shorthand here, is the pickup object. And then remember, we used this last week when we were programming our enemy nav. We used this global transform. This just tells us where it is in our scene. So our object position is the pickup object dot global transform dot origin. So that's just a long way of saying where the object is. And then our hand object is the same thing, but for our hand. So we'll say hand position is hand dot global transform dot origin. And so then what we want to do is just figure out the distance between the hand and the object. And so we'll make a direction variable. I'm just going to say dir. And so we're going to say hand position minus object position. I might be getting this backwards, but we can always turn it around. So that's the direction. And then we're going to normalize this. So remember, normalize just takes like a long distance and it shrinks it into like one segment. So we're going to say dot normalized. And then we're going to move it towards our hand. So we're going to say object or pick up object dot apply. Usually it tells me, maybe I need to clear my errors. Usually it gives me hints, which I could use here. Okay, so we need our pickup object dot apply. I forget the name of this function, but we basically want to apply a force. So let's go to our let's see. Let's go to our... Usually I would just click on the rigid body, but we don't have one. Okay, let's go to the documentation, search for rigid body. Where's the documentation for this? Rigid body, there we go. Okay, so these are all the methods. Okay, this is what we want. Apply central force. So we want to imply a force to the middle. Or maybe we want impulse. I think we want impulse. No, wait. No, we want to... I'm forgetting the order that we want to do this in. I think we might actually want to do this one for this. Set axis velocity. Let's read what that does. This is what we want. Okay, we're not applying a force. We just want it to come to the hand. So this says the velocity is a given vector, and okay, so we want to set the axis velocity so it'll move towards our hand. We don't want to apply a force. That's what we want to do when we want to throw it, I think. Let's try it. We can always switch it back. Or maybe we want... Okay, let's try set axis velocity. Set axis velocity, and we'll set it to that direction. So basically, we're getting the distance between the object and our hand. We're shrinking it down to a segment of 1, normalized to 1, and then we're moving it towards our hand. So I think this will work. Let's give this a shot, and then we will we'll add a couple tweaks. So now, if I walk up to the box and I hit F, okay, now it moves towards my hand, and it kind of wiggles around. It shouldn't do that. I might need to double check. It is kind of fun, but we want it to stay still. Okay, so let me double check. I was writing a script for this, and it should be in here. Oh no, it's not in here. Maybe it's on a different branch. Okay, it's not here. I might have forgotten to upload it. Anyway, let's just keep going. So once we do this, so we can also we can make it move faster if we want to. So we can set a speed. So that's another value that we can add up here. So we can make a variable called pull speed. And if we want it to go faster, we can basically just make this variable larger. So let's set it to 2 just to start. And so I'll multiply this direction by the pull speed. So if we want it to go faster, we can make it go faster. If we want it to go slower, we can do that. Okay, I don't know why it's wiggling so much. Okay, we'll fix that later, but for now, let's just keep going. So notice, so if I pick it up, it follows me around. And if I hit F again, I drop it. So if I'm in the area and I pick it up, I can move around with it, and it'll follow me. And then if I hit F, it gets dropped. Let me double check. Maybe I did some weird stuff with the physics. Oh, I set the mass to 1,000. That's what it is. I set the mass to 1,000 kilograms. That may explain why this isn't working exactly the way I thought it might. No, it's still doing this. Okay. Well, actually, let me make sure in the scene. Okay, I think I must have done something when I was playing around with these values that did something weird. but I'll fix that later. It's basically working, so we can just keep going. I'll debug this later. Okay, so if we have the object and we decided to pick it up, it follows us around until we hit F again, and then it just gets dropped because we're no longer telling it to follow us. Okay, so then the last thing we have to do is just throw the object. And so we can do that in unhandled input. So what we'll do is we'll say if input dot isAction just pressed, and now we'll look for throw. And so for this one, basically we want to add a force to it in the opposite direction of our camera. And the reason we do this is because we know our hand is in front of our camera, but we know they're facing in the same direction. So our camera is looking in the direction, that we're facing, but it's located opposite of our hand. So we're going to use that to get a direction to throw. So the first thing I'm going to do is set is picked to false. This way, it won't keep following us around. But I'm not going to set the pickup object to null just yet because we're still going to apply a force to the pickup object. So now I'm going to get the direction. So I'm going to say variable direction. And for this one is probably the trickiest line. Most of this stuff is not too crazy. This stuff is a little crazy, but this is probably the trickiest line because we need to know which way the camera is facing, and the camera rotates. And so the way that we do that is we say camera dot basis. Basis is basically just a complicated bit of math. It's a matrix that saves all of the rotation and position data in one place. And then we are going to get what's the z axis from our basis. So if we look at our scene, z is the direction basically that our object is facing forward. You can see that here z is the blue, and our player is always going to be facing, the z is always the direction that the player is facing. So in our script, I'm going to get the z basis, and then I'm actually going to get the opposite direction. So I'll say minus, and then I need to, I wish I had that script that I wrote because now I'm forgetting. I wonder where I put that. Oh, maybe did I put it in the wrong, I think I put it in the wrong GitHub. I did. I accidentally uploaded this to my other GitHub. Here we go. Okay. Oh, okay. Here's one thing that I got wrong. This is set linear velocity, not set axis velocity. That might explain the wiggling. Okay, here we go. So we've got. Oh, I forgot to use the global transform. There's too many things to remember. Okay, so we're going to just take the normalized. So we're going to say camera.global transform .basis.z.normalized. Okay, so again, this is long, but it basically just says where's the camera, what direction is it facing, and then again it turns it into one segment. And so we want to throw the object in the direction that we're looking at. And so then we're just going to apply an impulse to our object. So we're going to say picked object dot apply impulse, and we're going to apply that direction. And we'll make a couple more modifications, but after we do this, we want to say picked object equals null. So we no longer have an object picked up because we just threw it. Getting an error here. Oh, not picked, pick up object. Either one is actually fine. I kind of use both terms. Okay, let's try that. So now if I grab an object and I click the mouse, I throw it. And it actually throws it a decent amount. I do like this kind of like crazily wiggling. Oh, but it's not really throwing it in the right direction, so we might need to double check our code. But that is throwing, so let's change a couple things. So one thing is this is set linear velocity, not set axis velocity. So that'll make this stick to the hand better. And so notice the object is still rotating, and it's kind of like bumping off of the player collider. So you may want to make it so that you don't collide with the object, or what we could do is just move the hand farther away. So there's always like multiple options for dealing with different issues. If we move the hand a little bit farther out, then we won't see that collision happening, hopefully. So let's go and grab this box. Okay, we're still getting a little bit of a collision, so we could play with that a little bit. You could also use the code to freeze the box so it's not responding to physics anymore. Or you could just freeze it on one axis so it's not rotating around. You could deal with this in different ways. Okay, so now if I click, it'll throw. And let's test if I click, if I move over here. And pick it up. Okay, so it looks like it's throwing in the right direction, but let's add a speed for that. Okay, so last little couple of components. So we want to have a speed that we can throw it at. So we'll make another variable. We'll call this throw speed. And I'll set this to something big like 8. And so then we can multiply our direction by our throw speed. So I'll say times throw speed. So this will make it throw a little bit farther. And it may be too much. It just depends on the context. Okay, so that seems good. Let's see if we, oops. Uh-oh. Got an error. Not sure why. Okay, let's try throwing the ball. There we go. It's exciting. So we can throw these boxes. Okay, that's a pretty good speed. Another thing that we can add is if we want the box to go up a little bit, we can just add another direction to it. So this line is getting kind of long. Let's throw this throw speed down here, actually. And actually, we can just add another line here. So I can say direction equals direction plus, and I'm going to add a vector 3 here. A vector 3 is basically just 3 numbers that are packaged together, and it represents 3D space. So X is left and right, Z is back and forth, and Y is up and down. So if I want to go up, I can just set 1 on the Y value, and since our direction is normalized, this will make it go up a lot. You can obviously change this number to change the effect here. Okay, so if I grab this, and now if I throw it, see it goes up a lot, and then it arcs back down. So that might be a little too much. We could make another variable. Oh, I keep getting this error. We might need to check. I think what's happening is that somehow my pickup object, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to move. Yeah, I think this is the problem. I think I need to move isPicked down here, because I think in the split frame between me dropping the object and throwing it, it's assigning a new object since I'm standing next to a bunch of objects. So I think if I switch that, I won't get that error anymore. Let's check if I stand next to this object and then I throw this. That seems a little bit better. Okay. Okay, let's... All right. So that's basically it. We can get rid of this print line here. I think that's everything. Let's go back to our script and double check. Yeah, so that's everything. I did add a couple extra things in here, but I was just testing with that. So let's add a few comments, and then we'll commit this to the GitHub so you guys can look at it. So first we're going to check that we have an object picked up. Then we get the distance between object and hand, and then get the direction of that distance, and then move the object in that direction. Okay, and then for our throw section, we just detect user clicked throw, get direction of camera, add an upward direction, and then apply force in direction with throw speed. Okay. And then we remove object. Okay, so that's our whole script. Again, there's a lot of things that could be different about that script. So if you're not picking up a rigid body, then you wouldn't use the on-body entered. You would just use an area or whatever the object is. You might not want to throw the object. You might not want to be able to drop the object. You might want to be able to pick up multiple objects. There's lots of ways that this script could be different. So this is just like a basic starting point. If you have like a specific thing that you want to do in your game, we can discuss more how that might look. You could also use a raycast instead of an area to detect objects. There's a bunch of different ways that you could do a similar thing. Okay, I'm gonna save this. Oh, another thing we're gonna do next week is add some UI, because right now when I get next to an object, I only know that I can pick it up because I wrote the script, but our players obviously wouldn't know that because there's nothing that says you can pick this up. So we'll add in a little UI that says, like, you know, press F to pick up or whatever. All right.